Start with contracting sprites. Chapter 231, Senior Wu's Document. Due to Su Hao's strong interception, the school team exercise was paused for a moment. In a lounge, Su Hao got to know the other 9 people from the school team. 6 boys and 3 girls. Wang Qi, Zhang Zaihoqi, and Qinya were the 3 publicly recognized strongest people in the school. He was very familiar with Senior Zhang. His ace sprite was the goat horn immortal who was good at planting trees and making forests. It held a tree trunk walking stick, and there were many circles and patterns on its horns. Qinya, a seemingly quiet female senior, sat alone in a corner, reading a thick book. On her left, there was a bird that was not very big and was emitting white light all over. Holy Spirit Bird. It was combing its feathers with its head tilted, occasionally making cooing sounds. It took on duties such as scouting and treatment in the team. Captain Wang Qi. Su Hao looked at the thin senior in front of him, who was more than 1.8 meters tall. Then, he saw a tiger-like sprite with reddish-brown wings, that looked like flames growing out of its 2 ribs, behind the senior. Red Flame Qiang Qi. Senior Wang Qi Ace Sprite could reach Pseudo-Monarch rank directly. Its power was also the strongest among all the sprites. Welcome to our school team, Student Su Hao. Captain Wang Qi clapped and said. However, there was very little applause. Apart from Zhang Zaihoqi, the others' reactions were relatively calm. They only greeted symbolically. Because they were 3rd-year and 4th-year students, and Su Hao was a 1st-year student. The members of the school team were all top-notch experts among the students. They were originally individuals of noteworthy conduct and independent characters. They were proud people. Su Hao could understand. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Captain Wang Qi was also stroking Red Flame Qiang Qi hair awkwardly. Gurgle. Su Hao felt his hair being scratched. He followed Butterfly's gaze and saw someone from the school team. Formal team member, Tong Shang. He was also the person with the coldest attitude towards him in the school team. Butterfly said that it heard Tong Shang speaking ill of him just now. What bad things? Su Hao asked with the contract. Instantly, his vision turned hazy, and a voice seemed to come from the horizon. Butterfly was using illusion to create the scene. In just 2 to 3 seconds, the illusion dissipated. Su Hao shook his head slightly. So that's what happened. Tong Shang feels that Zhou Ming's is a 4th-year student and only had 1 chance to participate in the league. As for me, I'm only a 1st-year student and can participate in the next 3 years. Does he resent me for taking away Zhou Ming's opportunity? Or perhaps Tong Shang and Zhou Ming's have a pretty good relationship, so as a good friend. Su Hao shrugged and didn't care. In any case, the members of the school team rarely gathered together. As long as he cooperated and completed the necessary exercises, it was enough. On the other hand, the scenes of Butterfly's reappearance have improved a lot. After studying it for a few more days, could it be used to play films? Su Hao looked forward to it. Chi. The healing cabin door opened, and Butterfly flew out. The depletion from the battle just now had been replenished, and its condition had recovered to its optimal state. It flew onto the empty field and demonstrated the moves it was good at. 3 table tennis-sized orbs spun, displaying the secret manual application of the spiritual orb. The fixed illusion scene was also shown in the form of a projection. Finally, it had transformed into countless illusion butterflies. Its figure was ethereal and unpredictable. It actually has 3 tactical systems. Zhou Ming's did not lose for no reason. Thinking about it carefully, although Butterfly Fairy consumed a lot of energy in the battle just now, it was not discovered by young Master Cattail even until the last moment. The difference in strength is already very obvious. Wherever the strong were, they would be respected. After showing it, Su Hao's relationship with the seniors of the school team, mainly seniors, became a little closer. As a newbie, he didn't speak most of the time. He just quietly listened to the senior's consideration of tactics. He would occasionally interrupt and say, "My butterfly fairy's spiritual orb can be used as an eye to detect the enemy's movements. As long as it fights more, it can also slowly infiltrate the illusion imprint and finalize the battle." Well, because it just reached the extraordinary level, the new secret manual hasn't been developed yet. By the League, Butterfly Fairy should have other methods. Male seniors. Female seniors. It's human language. But when they thought about it carefully, they realized that Junior Hao was indeed not pretending just to be cool. He was really impressive. They heard that all the secret manuals and tactical systems were developed by him alone. Tong Sheng, who was standing on the outer side, had originally used a cold face to express his unhappiness, but at some point, he had approached closer. He pricked up his ears and listened. His expression became increasingly surprised. He suddenly realized that if he didn't work hard enough, he would have to follow in Zhou Ming's footsteps. His official member identity may soon be replaced by Hao. Sun, a celestial body. The members of the school team were all busy people. They only took a day to do team battle simulations. Then, they did their own things. It was just that they agreed to meet at a fixed time every month to do team battle exercises. It was also a time to test the strength of their respective sprites. If they kept stopping, they might also be challenged and replaced by those behind them. Next month, the senior Zhou I eliminated may very well challenge me again. Well, let Butterfly cultivate hard. The next day. Lakeview Court, Villa. None of the sprites were around. Dazed Crow, Big Fat Bear, and Dumb Unicorn had already learned to cultivate by themselves. The Bright Night Spirit didn't, but Butterfly brought it along, with his student card. That's right. I only have one student card. It's a little inconvenient. Logically speaking, since the union has already started to apply for ID cards for sprites, the school should also keep up with the times. For example, getting a few affiliated student cards? Student sprite cards. Hao crossed his legs and sat on the computer chair, wondering if he could give Senior Wu a suggestion. In front of him, on the computer in the bedroom, displayed a thesis prepared more than 10 days ago. The densely packed data was what Butterfly had measured for itself when it was experimenting during the holidays. He checked and felt that there was no problem, so he clicked to upload. In just 3 hours. A striking red dot appeared in the upper right corner backstage. He clicked it open. Dear high-level sprite cultivator Hao, the Butterfly Fairy form and analysis thesis you uploaded has been verified. Please receive the relevant rewards through the following channels. At this point, the full set of the thesis on Butterfly Fairy's evolution was complete. Hao stretched. He glanced at the union clearance level. It had already been raised to LV9. When it reached LV10, it could be considered as stepping into the upper levels of the union. The contribution points needed to go from level 9 to level 10 were more than 100 million points. At least 5 to 6 evolution theses, or 2 heavyweight papers. Well, level 9 is actually enough. What was the use of levels? Apart from various privileges and benefits, when Hao posted on the Union forum, there would always be a LV9 emitting purple light after his name. It was very eye-catching. Every time he posted, he would see many threads of worshipping Big Boss. Among them, there wasn't a lack of master-level sprite trainers who were much stronger than him. It was just that their level of authorization was lower than his, so they thought he was a big boss. It was a little cool. It was a little cool. It was only a little cool. Gurgle, gurgle. The ringtone sounded, humming a little tune. Hao saw the caller ID Senior Wu. He swiped the screen. Hello, Senior Wu. Sent me a confidential document? Oh, okay, I'll delete it after reading. The moment he hung up, the Sprite commandeering wristband vibrated. A small document was sent to his wristband. The document could only be read, deleted, and not edited, copied, or uploaded. He opened it and immediately fell silent. Chapter 232, Meeting the Principal. A few moments later. Indeed. He had actually expected this. After all, he was a Whale Island University student and had pretty high clearance in the Union. He didn't even need to look at any clues to discover many things that had gone wrong. As the Crown Sprite trainer principal, why does he need to guard the exit day and night? The experts of terrorist organizations such as the 10,000 Grace Cult and the Dark Society are far inferior to the Union. What are the ones supporting them behind the scenes? Why did the World War back then suddenly come to a halt? Many Heavenly King level big bosses haven't shown their faces for years. What's the reason? Everything is in the document in my hand. After reading it, Su Hao let out a long breath. As he had guessed, there were enemies in that world that could threaten the survival of humans. But it was also a little different. He had originally thought that there were intelligent races or high-level sprites that developed civilizations and formed countries. But neither. The threat came from outsiders like them. He took a pen and tapped it lightly on the table. According to the document, the aliens are actually humans like us. And in terms of appearance, there are only subtle differences in the color of the eyes and the temperament, but those can all be disguised. There's only one point, that the aliens are fundamentally different from us. Their blood is blue-green. Su Hao understood why the checks on the other entrance were much stricter. They were just afraid that the aliens would sneak into Planet Aquamarine. The aliens are outsiders like Planet Aquamarine, but they have had sprites much longer. According to the analysis, the aliens probably had passageways with the new world on the planet they were on since hundreds of years ago. He knew all too well what that meant. It has only been 61 to 62 years since the appearance of sprites on planet Aquamarine. Since then, many Heavenly King level and Crown levels, existences that he couldn't imagine had been born. Then, how strong are those aliens, who had been developing for hundreds of years since contracting sprites? The next day, with a heavy heart, Su Hao arrived at the square in front of the entrance tunnel at the end of Whale Island. Since he had to meet the principal teacher, he had brought along Butterfly and the others, including the entry-level Bright Night Spirit. Sprites squatted, stood, and sprawled around. Senior Wu looked at him and asked. You read all of it? Yes. Any thoughts? The so-called peaceful years are only because there are people who have been pushing ahead with heavy loads on their back. What else? Senior Wu, you guys are too great, it isn't easy. The flattery was very comfortable to hear. Senior Wu nodded in satisfaction and asked again. Give me a more realistic idea. What's your first reaction after reading the document? Su Hao probed. It can't be the end of the world tomorrow, right? Well, looks like you're pretty optimistic. There's not much of a problem. Su Hao was puzzled. Did he look very optimistic? But he saw that Senior Wu could read jokes. Usually, he was in the mood to cut trees and plants, so he felt that the sky probably wouldn't fall. There wasn't much of a problem. There's no need to panic. House prices will continue to rise. Woo-woo. A horn sounded. Su Hao turned around and saw a huge freighter approaching from the sea level. It gradually stopped at the small harbor at the tail of the island. Mountain-moving apes moved down the containers one by one and worked with the staff present to install them on the big trucks parked in the square. A moment later, more than 10 large trucks full of goods drove towards the tunnel. We're leaving too. Heavenly King Wu waved his hand and said. Su Hao and the others followed quickly. In the tunnel, the light was as bright as day, but there was only the sound of people and sprites walking. He looked at the 20-odd male and female seniors around him. Some of them had solemn expressions they should be newcomers like him. The other portion was much more normal. Those were experienced old people. Su Hao knew that in school, even 3rd and 4th year students might not know of the existence of aliens. That required an assessment. It was only yesterday that Senior Wu told him that everything about their students was recorded and analyzed by professionals. Only when one's character and strength met the requirements would the instructors reveal information about the aliens to them. Only then could one head to the second entrance. Some of them were merely elite level. In fact, their impact on the battle situation was almost negligible. There wasn't much difference between a few more and a few less. It was just that they needed to nurture real strong people among them, even national pillar level strong people. He thought. In front, the dozens of large trucks had already stopped and were being examined. They stopped at the fork on the right. To the left was the direction of Whale State City. It was a smooth journey. Only by going right would there be strict security and cumbersome examination procedures. Su Hao saw that even Senior Wu had been investigated. Checking student cards, wristbands, and fingerprints, red light also swept across Butterfly and the others. After a long while, there was a beep. Several Sprite trainer guards nodded at everyone. Identity verification complete, you can pass. The group moved forward again, walking in the oppressive tunnel. An alloy door in front of them slowly opened on both sides, like a huge beast in the dark opening its mouth to swallow everyone. A moment later. Whoosh! Some different sounds entered his ears, and light shone in from the entrance of the arched cave. Su Hao looked up at his surroundings. They had arrived. On the opposite side of the entrance was not a city, but a fortress. Compared to Whale State City, it seemed very desolate and cold. There were only 4 sides of the city wall, which was dozens of meters tall. It was plated with a crystal luster and glowed under the sunlight, giving people a sense of security. This was Whale Gate, the important checkpoint to guard the aquamarine entrance. It wasn't prosperous, but its status was especially special. Students, listen to the instructor's arrangements. Don't run around, don't run around, don't run around. I repeat 3 times, do you understand? Senior Wu said, then looked at the 2 school instructors and nodded slightly at them. I'll leave the rest to you. I'll bring Su Hao to meet the principal. He led Su Hao towards the stone steps on the side. Only a group of seniors was left, staring with wide eyes. They also wanted to be privileged. Tap. 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 It wasn't the sound of dumb unicorn hooves stepping on the ground, but the sound of Su Hao climbing the stairs. He had already climbed up one level after another. From the base of the fortress, they climbed up the side wall, then the front wall, and then headed for the central tower. They circled around. In Senior Wu's words, one could only feel the atmosphere after climbing it personally. On the city wall, Su Hao saw a vast forest in front. At the end of the forest was a lofty mountain. On the mountain, he vaguely saw a huge city. That is. That's the city of the aliens, and also where their entrance is. We call it Demon Snake City. Why is it called Demon Snake City? This, Senior Wu paused for a moment. It's a complicated story, so I won't talk about it. Wait for teacher to fill you in. Su Hao was puzzled. He was so angry. But he couldn't win against Senior Wu. There were many Sprite trainers stationed at Whale Gate. But ordinary elite level, or even master level Sprite trainers usually could only serve as warnings and guards. The ones truly guarding Whale Gate were 3 experts. Heavenly King Icebound, Heavenly King Burning Flame, and Principal Yang. The principal's usual resting and office place was on the top of the tower at the highest point of the fortress. Senior Wu knocked on the door. Teacher, guess who's here? In the room. The old man's friendly voice came out. Little Wu, oh, you brought your little junior here. Then let him stay. You? It's none of your business. Heavenly King Wu. Chapter 233, Sprite Trainer Butterfly. Heavenly King Wu didn't leave. Leaving would prove that he was a toolman. He went to the cabinet on the left, squatted down, and very skillfully pulled open the drawer below. From inside, he took out an extraordinary tea box. "Teacher! Take it, you're wasting my tea leaves again." The principal's face darkened. He waved his hand and stopped looking at him. He looked at Su Hao and examined him a few times, before his gaze became much gentler. It was like a grandfather looking at his grandson. Come, let me see your Sprite." The office was very spacious, and the floor was very hard and thick. It didn't seem crowded even when Dazed Crow and Big Fat Bear crawled in. The thin and small Principal Yang flipped out from behind the desk with a push of his hand. In an instant, he approached the Big Fat Bear, grabbed its hair and took a look. Then, it came to the side of the dumb unicorn and stretched out his finger to flick the scales on its body. The two sprites felt the aura and didn't dare to move at all towards the amiable-looking old man in front of them, they just didn't dare to. Their faces were filled with obedient.jpg. "Your few sprites are all cultivated very well. They are a little better than I imagined." As expected of a crown sprite trainer, his horizons were different. Unlike Senior Wu who wanted to grab a blade of grass every day. Although he was an elite for a year and took less than 2 years to become a master, in the eyes of his teacher, he was probably just above average. Work hard, he had to work hard. He wanted to. Principal Yang coughed, as if he was hiding it, but also thinking. After a few seconds, he said, "Since you brought all the sprites here today, well, I'll let my old buddies teach these little guys step by step." He snapped his fingers, and ripples appeared in the air. 2 sprites appeared in front of Su Hao's eyes. The first was a human-shaped sprite wearing a blue-purple satin robe and a black veil hat. It looked like an ancient minister. Ghost Element Sprite, Cabinet University Scholar. It evolved from the sprite Little Book Soul to Champion, and then into the final evolved form. However, Su Hao remembered that as a Ghost Element Sprite, the body of a Cabinet University Scholar was an illusion, a soul. However, the scholar in front of him was surrounded by nature energy. Its body was real. You could even see the shadow behind it. Just like a real person. The second was a holy brilliance spirit, emitting a gentle light. But unlike those Su Hao had seen before, the holy brilliance spirit in front of him had 12 wings of light, so holy that it made people unable to look straight at it. So, he glanced at the interface. There was very little information. He could only tell that the Cabinet University Scholar and the 12-winged Holy Brilliance Spirit were both monarch rank, but he dared to bet that with 10 bags of masks, the 12-winged Holy Brilliance Spirit could completely crush Senior Wu's trading puppet, 10,000 Vine Turtle, and Goat Horn Immortal with one hand. My old buddies, one is a ghost and the other is a light element, but they know a lot of things. Illusion, dark element unique skills, thunder, fire, and so on, they know a little about everything. Let them communicate by themselves. In the principal's office, Senior Wu took out a few pieces of emerald green tea leaves from the tea box very solemnly and placed them in 3 cups. He poured the water. Splash! A fragrance entered his nose. For a moment, Su Hao only felt that his mind was clear and he was full of energy. Even if he worked hard for another 10 hours on the thesis, there wouldn't be any problems. They haven't even had tea yet. What tea is this? Nameless tea leaves. Senior Wu gave him a look. Drink more. This is something only teacher will have. 1 sip will make your mind 100 times clearer. Drink 2 sips to replenish your soul power. Drink 3 sips. Su Hao took a small sip. In an instant, it was as if he was standing in the clouds. His eyes and ears became intelligent, and many things that he couldn't remember clearly in the past suddenly surfaced. It was actually tea leaves that could be effective on humans. He glanced at the interface, and even his soul power increased a little. No wonder Senior Wu wanted to come to teachers. Cough, cough, cough. Let me. As a junior, Su Hao had to take the initiative to boil water and make tea. After drinking 2 cups, he finally found an opportunity to ask. Teacher, why is that city called Demon Snake City? This is a long story, so I'll cut it short today. It can be summed up into 3 points. The principal stretched out a finger. You should know by now. The aliens stepped onto the land of the New World a few hundred years before us. Su Hao expressed his understanding. But he was still puzzled. What level would the aliens develop to in a few hundred years? In the beginning, when planet Aquamarine had just started contracting sprites, how did they survive without a heavenly king and a title? About decades ago, when the two empires were in a stalemate and the Cold War was about to break out, a world entrance suddenly appeared in the central region of Asia. He paused for a moment and said, at that time, it had already been 2 to 3 years since the appearance of sprites on planet Aquamarine. There were also more than 10 world entrances, but none of them were connected to the aliens. That entrance was the first to let us know that there were other humans. At that time, our planet Aquamarine didn't have any strong warriors. We could only use nuclear weapons to scare the enemy. From the teacher's description, Su Hao could imagine how tragic it was back then. Fortunately, at that time, planet Aquamarine already had the division of elite, extraordinary, and monarch ranks. They were wary about the strong aliens. Meanwhile, the aliens didn't understand tanks, planes, and types of mushrooms. Their technology and living standards were comparable to the ancient times of planet Aquamarine, and they were still in the ignorant tribal era. In the beginning, the aliens didn't care about our planet Aquamarine because there was a vast world waiting for them to explore. As for us, we adopted a fixed strategy for every entrance connected to the aliens. With the threat of a nuclear bomb, it also stayed in a stable stalemate for a long time. And then, later, the aliens targeted our technology. Technology. The answer was somewhat beyond his expectations. Seeing his surprise, the old man gave him a knock on the head. You yourself are also a high-level sprite cultivator, how can you say that you underestimate the power of technology? Think about it with your brain. If the Union doesn't have 9 years of compulsory education, Sprite universities, and all kinds of Sprite evolution pathways and unique skill learning methods that have not been announced, and without the theoretical support of advanced evolution, how many elite-level and master-level students can our Dragon Nation produce in a year? The answer was very, very little. Su Hao thought of himself. If he didn't have the facilities and resources of Whale Island University, even if he had a cheat, even if he was outstanding, it was impossible for him to be a master level now. It was all because the predecessors had paved the way. Does this mean that the aliens aren't as strong as we thought? No, they're still stronger than us, Principal Yang said. Su Hao, Then what were we talking about? Then, he heard his teacher say, but the aliens aren't uniform. They use their tribes as the main body, and their totems are different. They often attack one another, and the tribes that are eyeing our planet Aquamarine technology are only a part of them. The Demon Snake tribe is one of them, so my old bones have to stay here all this time. But as long as I, your teacher, am in charge, Demon Snake City won't have the guts to attack. Teacher was domineering. Su Hao screamed in admiration. The next second, he heard, if Demon Snake City really attacks, it also means that it's very dangerous. Su Hao was rendered speechless. From the tribes of the aliens, to technology, then to the strong people, and then to sprites, Su Hao understood a lot. Right now, just the Dragon Nation alone had many Heavenly King level sprite trainers, so their situation wasn't as dangerous as decades ago. But they still couldn't relax. In the end, there were still a lot more strong people among the aliens compared to from planet Aquamarine. Especially since 20 to 30 years ago, tribes like Demon Snake had begun to steal and learn the technology of planet Aquamarine. Their development had also become much more rapid. At the moment, planet Aquamarine could only defend. Su Hao looked out of the window. Over here, they could see the large forest that was in front of them, between them and Demon Snake City. He thought that if it was categorized according to the game map, it might only be a small circle near Whale Gate, a blue area. Outside, the whole vast forest was filled with dangerous red areas. It was difficult for Sprite trainers of Dragon Nation to infiltrate deeper. Even if rare treasures appeared, they could only fall into the pockets of Demon Snake City. But since there's no war and no exploration, then, what's the use of the Sprite trainers here at Whale Gate? Because you can't let your guard down. The principal said, if you don't hit them or chop off their hands, they won't be obedient. Attacking every day will affect the quality of sleep of mine, as an elderly. There are basically no battles above the Heavenly King level, but small-scale battles erupt from time to time in that large forest. You also have an extraordinary level Sprite now. In a small-scale battle between the champion and Heavenly King, you are a high-level combatant, so. Su Hao understood. Going to the battlefield was expected. It wasn't the tragic city defense battle he had originally expected. That was already pretty good. He was a young man who loved his country and had a firm stand. It was just that. What if we get targeted by a soon-to-be Heavenly King? He had to admit that he was a little scared. The battlefield wasn't a place where you could go just because you wanted to. On the first day, Su Hao stayed in the fortress. The next day, Su Hao was still in the fortress. Together with the dozen or so seniors who were also newbies, they went for lessons. The reason why the Demon Snake tribe is named this way is because their main sprite is the snake-headed demon pathway. Their technology is inferior to ours, but after hundreds of years of research, I can only say that the cultivation plan of the snake-headed demon is very, very perfect. We can even see the different development directions of the fourth form. On the battlefield, the enemy you need to be the most wary of is the snake-headed demon. On the screen, a sprite with a human upper body and a snake lower body appeared. Its hair also looked like countless little snakes spitting their tongues. Snake-headed demon. The snake-headed demon of the demon snake tribe has many areas of expertise. The brown-haired snake-headed demon is good at petrification and likes to use the unique skill petrifying light. As for the green-haired snake-headed demon, they are good at using poison. They can create large amounts of poisonous mist. In addition, there are also snake-headed demons skilled in perception, snake-headed demons skilled in binding, snake-headed demons skilled in charm. Su Hao learned something new. Intelligence points actually jumped 5 times. Shocking! The demon snake tribe was only one of the many tribes on the alternate planet. The types of sprites and cultivation plans they had might not be as comprehensive as the Alliance after all. The relationships between their tribes weren't harmonious. But the snake-headed demon sprite was definitely developed to the extreme by the demon snake tribe. The difficulty of advancing to monarch rank may not even be high. But after all, they are the same type of sprite, and they also have disadvantages. Perhaps earth element materials, valuable materials used by the snake-headed demon, are very precious to them over there, unlike us, where due to the diverse development, most of the precious materials have developed corresponding value. Knock, knock, knock. Teacher, it's me. Su Hao pushed the door open and entered. When he saw Butterfly flying over, its body shrank halfway. With a gurgle, it laid on top of his head. You've learned it. It learns. Well, faster. The principal's head reached out from behind the computer, took a look, and then retracted back. Su Hao saw that the illusion elemental control column on Butterfly's interface was already LV2. He looked at the training field outside the floor-to-ceiling window. The dazed crow emitted a dazzling light, but it didn't turn into a small sun. There were only some flames, like liquid, flowing on its feathers like a layer of armor. It wasn't that it was weak, but it had truly mastered the flaming form. There was no longer a large amount of energy dissipating. Its endurance ability increased by a lot. It waved its sword, and the extreme flames formed a red sword flare, flying 100 to 200 meters away with a whoosh. Yay! Woo 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 woo. Su Hao heard the voice of the big fat bear. He looked around and found that in the corner of the training field, the big fat bear had its arms wrapped around its head and was curled up into a ball. In front of it, a series of tiny thunder arcs emerged from the fingertips of the 12-winged Holy Brilliance Spirit, which electrocuted the big fat bear. Every time it electrocuted it, its chubby body would tremble. As if it had sensed his arrival, the big fat bear looked up with a sobbing face. Su Hao looked at the fat crying bear and recalled. It seemed to have never really endured any damage. The only time it was hardcore bullied was to pull its leg, and it was dealt with by dazed crow and butterfly in minutes. Well, then let's continue. He made a praying gesture towards the big fat bear. He also saw the bright night spirit working hard to cultivate beside the 12-winged Holy Brilliance Spirit. It drew a light energy ball with its left hand, and with its right, black light dots gathered and gradually turned into a ball shape. Suddenly, its long, blazing white hair turned black. Phew-phew, phew-phew, ee. It was stunned. It saw that there were actually two balls in its hands, one white and one black. It threw them forward at once. The two energy balls collided with each other and exploded with a boom. It clapped loudly, and then discovered that it was targeted by the 12-winged Holy Brilliance Spirit. Stare! The dark side of Bright Night Spirit also froze. Seeing that the sprites were all cultivating hard, Su Hao. Well, he was relieved. Teacher, apart from the Bright Night Spirit, I'll take all the other sprites with me. Go, go. Principal Yang waved his hand to chase them away. His eyes didn't leave the computer in front of him. He stared a little too close, as if he wanted to stick himself onto it. Wouldn't he be short-sighted? Su Hao had just had this thought when it was extinguished. An elite level wasn't even afraid of short-sightedness, much less teacher. He was probably too busy. It was just that he couldn't see Principal Yang, who was in front of the computer, smiling, a little wretchedly. On the wide city wall that could accommodate 4 cars moving side by side. More than 10 newbies, including Su Hao, stood upright. In front of him, the instructor in the class distributed black Sprite commandeering wristbands to each of them. This is a special wristband for the battlefield. It has the function of locating, contacting, and asking for assistance. Of course, there are distance restrictions. In addition, Sprite trainers who are captured alive or killed from the Demon Snake tribe can only receive merit points as rewards for those who have records. This merit point can be exchanged for treasures from the headquarters of our Dragon Nation. Its value is even higher than the credits of our school. When he heard the word killed, Su Hao originally thought that he would be a little uncomfortable. But no. Perhaps it was because he had caught countless wanted criminals. Those were small experiences, while the people from Demon Snake City were high-level experiences. He saw many male and female seniors eager to try. You're all newbies on the battlefield. I've assigned teams to you. Well, you don't need to. He was looking at Su Hao. But remember, don't go too deep. Safety first. All right, you guys find your teams and set off. Su Hao was on his own, and left with his sprites. The others had to wait for their team, but the way they looked at Su Hao was very surprised and curious. He seems to be the freshman Su Hao. Su Hao rode the dumb unicorn and entered the forest. When he looked up, he could only see dense leaves and branches, and no sunlight. The surrounding giant trees were dozens of meters tall, making them look especially small. After riding for a while, he made the dumb unicorn stop. Then, he brought Butterfly down. Recover your size. Gurgle. It typed out a question mark, but it still changed into Butterfly Fairy's original appearance. Its butterfly wings trembled slightly as it floated in mid-air. Su Hao looked at Butterfly, which was as tall as him, and took off the black Sprite commandeering wristband he had just received. Under Butterfly's dull gaze, it wrapped it around its wrist. You're already a mature sprite, you can try to be a sprite trainer now. Chapter 234, So Hao Was Targeted? Giving the wristband to Butterfly wasn't a thought that Su Hao had come up with in the spur of the moment. Instead, it was a decision that he had made after careful consideration for 2 days. Let Butterfly be a sprite trainer and let it PK at the front line. There are a few benefits to doing so. Firstly, safety. A weakling like me won't be exposed to the enemy's attack range. Secondly, safety. Even if Butterfly and the others encounter a strong enemy and fall into a desperate situation, I can still save the situation. How? One summon and they'd be home right away. This kind of unconventional battle tactic wasn't created by Su Hao alone. Many sprite trainers did it. During class yesterday, their instructors had also taught them that it was safe and reliable to set up arrays in the 1-1-2 mode. An investigative soldier scouted ahead. A sprite trainer was a distance behind. The 2 sprites protected him from both sides. But the contractual connection between sprite trainers and sprites is limited by distance. People like me can speak to each other with our voices within 1 to 2 kilometers, and can speak in words within 3 to 5 kilometers. With delay from lagging, I can sense the general situation of sprites within 10 kilometers, such as injuries, serious injuries, near death, cold, and completely cold. If it's further away, there are only 2 possibilities: there's no signal from the contract connection, the contract is broken, or the sprite died. Wouldn't that be too late? But he was different. No matter how far away he was, the interface could reflect the state of the sprites, enough to summon them back before Butterfly died. It could carry out casual tactics till the end. Quite a fee. The only problem is the spoils of war. The summoning can't bring back external items, and the wristband has to be left behind, but compared to losing my life, it's not a problem. That's only under extremely unlucky circumstances. Su Hao told Butterfly about his plan, then turned on the GPS. The radar showed several green dots around. Those are our allies. It doesn't matter if you ask for help, assist others, or join forces. Just act according to the situation. The wristband also has communication functions. You can type and send messages to your allies within a kilometer or 2. After hearing what he said, the words on Butterfly's head had already become. It thought about it, lowered its head and operated the wristband with its fingertips a few times. After bargaining for a while, it finally agreed. Gurgle. Just bring. Well, let me think. His gaze swept across the bear, the crow, and the horse. Dumb unicorn, I have an important mission for you. Nay. It said I can. This mission is to stay and protect your sprite trainer, my safety. Nay. Do you have any objections? Nay. It shook its head violently like a rattle drum. It's a happy decision, Su Hao said. Butterfly, bring Dazed Crow and Big Fat Bear deeper into the forest. We'll provide technical support at the back. Gurgle. The Big Fat Bear also stood up and patted its chest to show that there was no problem. Dazed Crow. After a few seconds, it made a squawk sound, which was considered a normal delay. There was no problem either. Inside are the jade powder, potions, and other things that the 3 of you need. The grey ball is a smoke bomb that can release smoke that can interfere with perception. The red one is a loud sound bullet. Apart from that, there are also small things like alarm devices. You will use them anyway. He hung a small satchel around Butterfly's neck. There weren't many things. Because they didn't need to bring troublesome things like tents and sleeping bags. Butterfly team, start moving. Gurgle. Giant wood forest covered the sky and the earth, vast and boundless. Butterfly kept flying at a low altitude. After flying for dozens of minutes, the surrounding scenery was roughly the same. No matter which direction it flew towards, there were just huge trees. Without a compass or positioning equipment, it was easy to get lost inside. Butterfly didn't have this problem. From time to time, the antenna on its head would straighten up and spin. It was using its unique skill, spiritual perception, but in its perception, the forest was dense, but especially silent. Gurgle. It wasn't very used to an environment that not even a wild sprite could experience. It remembered what Su Hao said. Because this is a battlefield, we can only see allies, enemies, enemies, enemies. Then, he lowered his head and looked at the radar on his wristband. He couldn't see any green dots either. They were already in the danger zone. Gurgle. It said softly. The dazed crow, which was flying slightly higher, was already on standby for battle. Its eyes swept around sharply. The electric bear, which was running on the ground, had its footsteps become very light and soft. There was only the subtle sound of its paws stepping on the withered leaves. The whole forest was quiet. Suddenly. Ding! The dazed hair on Butterfly's head bounced up again. It looked in a certain direction, and an emerald green energy ball appeared in its palm in an instant, which it shot out forcefully. The energy ball kept spinning and flew out in an arc in the woods, going around tree trunks. Boom! The explosion was especially obvious in the silent forest. The dazed crow, which was flying 20 to 30 meters high, also flew out like an arrow when the energy ball flew out. In just a moment, the sound of battle rang out in the distance again, and red light blossomed. Butterfly chased after it and flew to the place where the energy ball landed. There was a pit, and a broken carapace as well as a needle-shaped tail could be seen in it. After moving forward a distance, it saw some brown scales. There were traces of high-temperature burn marks on the broken scales. 2 sprites. Butterfly deduced and analyzed, and used spiritual perception. It could only sense the dazed crow and another unfamiliar sprite. No enemy sprite trainers were discovered. The mental waves of sprite trainers and sprites were essentially different. At this moment, Butterfly had been chasing for 5 to 6 seconds. It could vaguely see the dazed crow and the fleeing sprite. It nimbly crawled through the bushes. Everywhere it passed, green poisonous mist was left behind. Gurgle. It thought for half a second and activated the illusion imprint left on the dazed crow. That was a secret signal that had been prepared long ago. Do not pursue a desperate foe. The dazed crow that flew back tilted its head, not quite understanding. Squawk. Butterfly understood the dazed crow's question, but it wasn't in a hurry to answer. When the bushes at the back were pushed aside and the big fat bear arrived, it then used its psychic powers to make a branch on the ground fly up into its hand. With a wave, specks of green light emerged from the top of the branch. Butterfly came to the tree trunk that needed more than 10 people to hug around and used it as a blackboard. It waved the tree branch and wrote the words "Do not pursue a desperate foe." Then, it circled the word desperate. Squawk. The dazed crow still tilted its head to more than 100 degrees. Butterfly hated this good-for-nothing crow. Gurgle. It named the big fat bear to answer the question. The big fat bear immediately stood up straight, scratched its head and thought about it. Sob sob sob, because desperate. Butterfly nodded slightly when it heard this. It wrote a few words. Only sprite trainers have merit, while sprites don't. So, the enemy's sprite equals desperate. Crow and bear kept nodding in agreement. Butterfly and the others left, leaving only the dumb unicorn to accompany Su Hao. He rode the dumb unicorn to the top of a huge tree branch dozens of meters tall. He sat in a wide position, with his back against the main trunk and his eyes fixed on the interface. It wasn't that he didn't know that it was safe to sit on the back of the dumb unicorn and it was convenient for him to escape, but the battle in the forest wouldn't be short. If he were to sit on the back of the dumb unicorn the whole time, its scales would get a little cold. Sitting for too long wasn't good for his body. He put a soft cushion under his butt and looked behind him. Through the treetops, he could see the towering city wall. As long as the demon snake tribe doesn't come knocking on my door, I basically won't be disturbed at this position. But after staying for a long time, it seems a little boring. Su Hao didn't expect that the label for his first battle would actually be boredom and dull. Since he had to keep staring at the interface, he couldn't sleep. It's really not easy for me. A wind-chasing horse galloped. The young man on the horse looked around. After a while, stop! He saw a branch on a huge tree broken into the shape of Z. There was a mark left over a month ago. He followed the mark and traveled hundreds of meters until he arrived in front of a huge tree. It was a huge tree that required more than 10 people to wrap their arms around. Roots were wrapped around the bottom like giant earthworms. The young man walked around the tree, his gaze sweeping across inch by inch. It's here. He turned and looked around. There was no sign of anyone. It was quiet. Then, he squatted down and pushed aside the fallen leaves with his palm. He could see traces of soil being buried underneath. Master Hound, dig it out. A human-shaped sprite jumped down from the tree trunk and waved its claws. The soil was flipped open with a whoosh, revealing a box buried deep underground. The young man opened the box. There was another box inside. He kept opening, and kept opening, until finally, he saw a small note. It was written in Crooked Dragon Nation text. North, 5 kilometers. Yours, every Monday morning. The young man placed the note in the Master Hound's hand and let it shatter. Then, the ground returned to its original state. He stood where he was for several minutes. His pupils seemed to be out of focus. Suddenly, he flipped over and rode the wind-chasing horse, his tone no longer fluctuating. Go north. 5 kilometers away, a young man hid on top of a tree and waited for 2 days. Finally, a snake-headed demon appeared and made hiss noises with its tongue. Its snake hair was red and very eye-catching. Its cold snake eyes looked around. I see you. Come out. The sound came from a square machine at the snake-headed demon's waist. It was a male voice, speaking in very inauthentic Dragon Nation language. At the same time, the red-haired snake-headed demon also raised its head and stared in a certain direction. On the tree crown, the young man's body turned cold. Beside him, the muscles of the wind-chasing horse and Master Hound, which had elite limit strength, both tightened. The young man rode his Pegasus down from the tree crown and raised both his hands. A moment later, he saw someone walking out from behind the bushes. It was a man with long black hair and brown eyes. He was wearing a full set of leather armor, and there was a demonic snake demon pattern tattooed on the chest area of his armor. The young man knew that it was the totem of the demon snake tribe, the snake god. He lowered his head. Lord Oracle. What did you bring to Lord Snake God? The person said word by word. The young man immediately took out items from his bag. Touch-screen cell phone, computer, walkie-talkie. The oracle stared at the cell phone and snatched it over. After flipping through it for a few seconds, he finally found the switch and pressed it forcefully. The screen lit up, and the oracle said without looking up. This, not bad. Seeing that the oracle didn't continue, the young man opened his mouth and mustered up his courage to ask, Sir Oracle, my companion, can she come back? Is the apple of your eye only worth this little thing? Not enough, still not enough. You. What else does Lord Oracle want? The snake god requires valuable information, such as your sprite cultivation technique. As long as you can get it, she can immediately return to your side. Not only her, the reward is also very big. The snake god won't mistreat every devotee. As the leather armor oracle spoke, he reached into his pocket and grabbed a white crystal the size of a pebble. It was a wind element crystal. He threw it up and down in his hand. We have a lot of these things, as long as... But I'm just an ordinary student, I can't do that. The oracle's expression gradually became impatient. Seeing this, the young man's brain kept working. He suddenly shouted, "I have news. Our principal. Our principal's disciple is in the forest. He's only at master level." His words came out of his mouth, and he froze after he finished speaking. Jingmen Pass. On the third day, Butterfly and the others came back. Su Hao took back the black wristband and brought them back to the fortress. An elite level. The instructor checked the records of the wristband. When he saw that Su Hao seemed to be very depressed, he said, "To have this achievement on the first time, is already not bad. We have fought against the Sprite trainers of Snake Demon City for many years, each and every one of them are extremely cunning, don't underestimate their elite levels." Su Hao also knew that. He had asked Butterfly about the details of the battle. In the past 3 days, they had encountered numerous enemies. Most of the time, they would retreat after one attack. From time to time, they were also chased away by the enemy's large army. Only a few times did they catch the elite teams with less than 10 sprites from the demon snake tribe. However, the results were minimal. At most, they could kill a few sprites. The only time they were lucky. "Butterfly, wasn't my tactic clever, gurgle?" They caught a sprite trainer from Demon Snake City, but before Butterfly's illusion could break through the protective barrier, that person had already consumed poison and committed suicide. Su Hao, damn, it's too scary. After resting for a day in the fortress, Su Hao's team set off again. The enemies were cunning and they had little battle results, but participating in the battle was not just for benefits. They were the eyes of Whale Gate. Once they suffered setbacks in the battle area, they could only hide in the fortress. Then, it was very disadvantageous for the overall situation. It wasn't impossible for Demon Snake City to launch a large-scale attack while they were unaware. Well, it's precisely because of the danger that the battlefield can completely unearth the potential of sprites. I heard that many sprites stuck at the limit of elite level broke through after a life and death battle. Besides, a battle period is half a month. Whale Gate usually only opens in half a month, and the time isn't up yet. He had originally intended to experience the cruelty of battle himself, but they had just left less than 10 kilometers from Whale Gate when they were ambushed by sprites of Demon Snake City's sprite trainers. One of them was an extraordinary level. "It's too passive for me to go up personally. So, I can only rely on you, Butterfly." Su Hao, who had escaped back to Whale Gate, said so. Whoosh whoosh. Butterfly flapped its wings and flew at a moderate speed in the forest. After a few days of battle, it had grown a lot. The antennae on its head didn't tense up all the time, and its battle instinct had also become much stronger. They were all in the mood to take a look at the wristband while flying. Buzz buzz. The wristband vibrated. It tapped and a distress signal popped up. "We are trapped in the valley with coordinates 261, 416. There is an extraordinary level in the enemy team. Requesting reinforcements, requesting reinforcements." They were allies. It was stupid Su Hao's classmate. Without much hesitation, it called its 2 underlings and flew speedily towards the coordinate valley. Chapter 235, Demon Snake Oracle, he has nowhere to run. The terrain in Giant Wood Forest was complicated. The fact that Butterfly's wristband could receive a distress signal meant that it wasn't far from the team that sent the signal. In just 2 to 3 minutes, it discovered the figure of a sprite in front. A rapidly spinning energy ball appeared in Butterfly's hand before it suddenly dissipated. It looked like an ally's sprite, gurgle. The few sprites also discovered them. Both parties looked at one another and entered a stalemate. Suddenly, buzz, buzz. Butterfly's wristband shook. It didn't look down and just quietly used its psychic power to control it. It peeked at the information on it. Sky Pattern Tiger, Elephant General, Thunder Lion King, Death Locust. It corresponded to the 4 sprites it encountered. Butterfly also silently used its psychic power to write down the information about its sprite. Butterfly Fairy, Flaming Spirit Crow, Electric Bear. I'm my own sprite? It felt a little strange. But after confirming their identities and that they were on the same side, the aura of the battle that was about to erupt dissipated. Butterfly glanced at the radar. Nearby, there were 4 dots on the left. It should be a 4-man team, gurgle. Gurgle. It then saw a green dot on the right, about the center of the radar. Turning around, it saw a young man riding a wind-chasing horse over. When he looked over, he paused. Because I'm already the only butterfly fairy, gurgle? It didn't care. It only used illusion to cover the wristband, not operating it. Using a speed of 1 to 200 characters per second, it speedily commented in the vicinity of the wristband, discussing tactics with the others. AP, we have 2 extraordinary level battle powers. Even if the enemy has a hidden extraordinary level, we can save that team. The most important thing now is to find that team. According to the positioning, the 2 people in that team are hiding within a kilometer in front. AP, but the enemy is also nearby. Those people from the demon snake tribe are not as skilled as us, but they are very good at sneak attacks. We must be careful, once our trump card is injured. A sprite trainer named AP said on the nearby channel, but he was only halfway through. Suddenly, boom! In the distance, a dazzling ball of fire appeared and rose up. The loud explosion could be heard clearly from miles away. Among the 4 sprites, the sky-patterned tiger, which had an extraordinary aura, let out a low growl. Its 2 huge wings formed by invisible swirls of wind flapped aggressively, turning into white afterimages as it flew into the distance. Gurgle! Butterfly called out. Above, the dazed crow made a squawk sound. Its body was covered with layers of flaming feathers. It flew up suddenly and drew a long flaming line in mid-air. Boom! Flames, thunder, wind, and waves exploded in succession. Countless branches and leaves broke and flew in all directions. Only the main branches of the huge trees that needed more than 10 people to encircle remained strong in the storm. 2 minutes later, at the entrance of the valley, the young man riding a horse appeared again. He looked at the black-haired oracle. Lord Oracle, I've already confirmed that it's that person's sprite. The location indicated that he's also nearby. Very good, leave the wristband behind. You go too. Yes, yes. After watching the young man disappear, several figures wearing leather armor appeared behind the black-haired oracle. Can you guarantee that it's him if you don't see him? Someone asked. The black-haired oracle snorted. Don't question my understanding of Dragon Nation. They contract many types of sprites, and there are very few teams of the same type. Besides, sprites like Butterfly Fairy have just appeared, they are unique. I originally thought that he was only a disciple of the principal and had some value. I didn't expect that he himself was also a big fish. Big fish? Isn't that just a young man? What do you know? That person is only 19 years old, but he has already published several important theses. Do you know what a thesis is? The black-haired oracle actually didn't understand either, but it didn't stop him from raising his chin. He knows more things than our tribe's offerings. If this child grows, he will definitely cause serious obstruction to our tribe. But if we can capture him alive, the things in his mind, the importance of him, then... Jijij. The others nodded in realization. Achoo. On the tree branch, Suha rubbed the tip of his nose and looked at the dumb unicorn. Did I catch a little cold? Dumb unicorn's eyes were filled with confusion. Forget it. He waved his hand. When he saw that the dumb unicorn couldn't sit still and ran around in circles again, he opened the interface again. Suddenly, he was stunned. Oh! The dazed crow is injured. Giant wood forest, small valley. Green plants covered the whole area. Huge trees grew vertically, horizontally, and diagonally, with dense foliage. They looked like huge mushrooms. Boom! An elephant general was sent flying, breaking several thick branches and smashing onto a tree trunk, causing it to cave in. Not far away, a sandstorm giant scorpion raised its sharp pincers and approached with cracking sounds. A red light flashed past, and the giant scorpion's body suddenly shrank. However, a huge cut was still made on one of its pincers, and it almost broke directly. At the same time, a scorching sun rose, and heat waves rolled over. Swish! Thick yellow light beams directly hit the sun. The whole sun was suddenly raised high, brushed by the yellow light beam. The sun became much dimmer. Petrified feathers fell from the sky. On the other side, in front of Butterfly, 3 elite-level snake-headed demons sank into the illusion. They shot out petrifying light beams at one another and fell at the same time. However, a red shadow exploded out of the bushes and arrived in an instant. The red shadow was a snake-headed demon with only red hair. On its 2 hands, it held 2 red scimitars made of spiritual force. It was a snake-headed demon skilled in close combat. In Butterfly's eyes, the scimitars instantly arrived in front of it, slashing down with red shadows. It subconsciously made comparisons. It was at least 2 to 3 times faster than the dazed crow. Swish! 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 Its petite body was separated from the center, turning into countless illusion butterflies that scattered in all directions. However, the red-haired snake demon wasn't surprised. Its cold eyes swept across its surroundings. Suddenly, it fixed its eyes on a certain spot and leaped up again, slashing with its scimitar. In the originally empty place, Butterfly's figure was forced by the aura of the scimitar and suddenly appeared. Its butterfly wings trembled as it quickly dodged backwards, but it was still inferior to the red snake-headed demon's saber beam. Puff! The spot where the saber beam landed was slightly slanted, but a few strands of emerald green hair were still cut off. It looked at the strands of hair floating in mid-air, slowly drifting down before disappearing in the blade light. Butterfly's eyes went from shock, to anger, and then to calm. Its big eyes were as calm as the surface of a lake, reflecting the figure of the red-haired snake-headed demon. Gurgle! Gurgle! An invisible spirit power shock wave spread out, raising ripples in the air. The red-haired snake-headed demon's figure paused for a moment. Its expression was especially sinister due to the pain and distortion. 2 minutes later, Butterfly hid in a tree hole with the miserable-looking dazed crow and big fat bear. It used the wood element to make the tree hole grow and close, and then used illusion abilities to block the waves of it and its 2 underlings. Finally, it took a breath. It had time to look at the information on its wristband. AP, something's wrong, there are too many enemies. AP, I clearly checked earlier, there aren't many traces of sprites in the valley. Did the sprites from Demon Snake City just surround us from the periphery? Our luck is so bad. FF, the 2 who sent out the distress signal were never found. I suspect it's a trap, the wristband is in the enemy's hands. AP, that's impossible, right? The wristband has a password and other certifications. Those people from the Demon Snake tribe can't even use their cell phones properly, how can they unlock our wristband? DXD, what if it's not unlocked? Gurgle. AP. FF. AP, so now, we're very likely surrounded. Have you turned off the positioning device? He saw that there were only 2 green dots on the radar. The black-haired youth understood the reason. So what if we're discovered? He has nowhere to run anymore. Around him is an escape-proof net. There are 9 extraordinary levels and countless elite levels. While he only has 1 extraordinary level that has just advanced. How can he escape? Seek assistance? How can he ask for assistance? You guys are just inexperienced. The surroundings are filled with our people and our sprites. If he goes further, the signal can't be received. The plan is absolutely flawless, Jijij. The black-haired oracle looked ahead, the corners of his mouth curled up, his smile as sinister as a snake. In the tree hole, Butterfly felt that there was a problem. It was as big as a fried egg. It thought. The three of them could be summoned away by Su Hao, but they had other allies in the enemy's encirclement. There should be 4. They were in danger. What should I do, gurgle? It saw the miserable, in fact, there was only the dazed crow with medium-degree injuries. A weeping, but lightly injured big fat bear, suddenly had an idea pop into its mind. Ding dong. Gurgle. Wah. Wah. The big fat bear kept shaking its head and shrinking back, but there was only so much space in the tree hole, it was forced onto the road of no return, there was nowhere to hide. It could only look pitifully at the dazed crow sharpening its blade in front of him. It made sob, bear is afraid of pain, sounds. Squawk. The dazed crow comforted it. Seeing that comforting didn't seem to work, it slashed down. It slashed at the big fat bear's left arm, slicing through the fur, leaving a wound the length of an adult's forearm. There were obvious burn marks around the wound. Sob. Waves of pain came. The big fat bear wanted to cry, but it didn't dare to make a sound. It had it too difficult.